Hello, beautiful people.
Benny.
Hi, Benny.
What a surprise. Lovely to see all your faces. From
Lovely to
Kiwi
be
and
here.
New Zealand and Ireland and South
New
Africa.
Zealand.
Well, what's that, Leslie?
New Zealand.
Yeah, I did say that. I said Kiwi
Oh,
land.
did you? Sorry.
Kiwi.
Oh, yeah.
Focusing.
Yes,
Has
Joe.
anybody-
Alrighties, let's do a quick check-in, maybe a sentence or so, which means a sentence or so, as opposed to a paragraph or a chapter or so. Let's start with top left, Caro.
Well, it's good to be here. I'm really excited I managed to get online at the right time in the right space.
Indeed, welcome, welcome. Monique.
Yep, good, fine.
All right.
Chilling.
Chilling? Yeah, it is a bit chilly this morning. Ellie.
All good. Having some holidays. It's winter, it's freezing, and we're not going outside.
Retreat inside, literally. Excellent. Shirley.
Didn't sleep well, was far too hot, and my back is still bugging me around, and I'm getting irritated.
And interesting that the irritation probably exacerbates the back. Yeah, I mean, you know all that stuff. Avanol. Hold on. Yeah, let me just... You need to unmute yourself, Avanol. For some reason, I can't unmute you. That's it.
Just had a very physical day, pruning and digging and cutting, so but sore in my hands.
Oh, wow. Yeah, serious gardening. An activity I simply fail to understand, much as I love gardens. Jane.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to be here. And I am A1 amazing. Capital A, capital M, capital Z.
Capital unfuckwithable.
Ah, yeah, that too. Yeah.
Carol.
I don't really know what to say. I'm fine and I'm glad to be here.
Good. Megan.
So a little bit tired. I had Olivia's birthday party over the weekend, which, yes, was big and huge, and everyone had a lot of fun, but there were 17 kids all in my home. It's a big thing for an introvert. But it was
Hats
fun.
off. Hats off. So, I mean, neither here nor there, but it is a question that I find increasingly hard to answer. Somebody asks, how are you? Like, which part of my life would you like me to focus on? It's kind of a strange question, I think. Anywho, here we are. So thank you for those of you that posted on the group what you would like from the call. Some of it I couldn't quite connect the dots. So let's start the call. I have a couple of exercises that I think might be useful for us to go through, or more to the point for you to go through. And at the same time, let's get the Q&A done so we know that your questions have been answered. I know some of you asked for more examples. So Ellie, I'm specifically thinking of your post. You wanted to know from this one to that one and this one to that one. How did you mean? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, that would help. I'm really okay with lover and magician, but a couple of comments you made, and I went, oh, that's warrior. Oh, okay, I thought that was sovereign. So I'm still confused as to what, and I haven't gone on to the 12 that the guy suggested, which I want to progress to that too, but I'd like to get the 4 in my head first. And sure. I don't get them just instantly. They don't come. Lover and sovereign, lover and magician do, but the others don't.
Okay.
Don't.
All right, so let's spend a bit of time on Ellie's question. So if we focus on the warrior first, what would you say so just for everybody, just unmute yourself and throw your answer in the pot. What would you say are the attributes or qualities or telltale signs of the deflated or inflated or balanced warrior being present?
Anger?
Boundaries.
Okay, so anger is one. So when somebody expresses anger, that's typically a case. And remember, there's nothing wrong with anger. I think we spoke about this in one of the calls. There's a big difference between expressing anger and being angry. So we can express, so anger can be the balanced archetype. Like, because it is about boundaries, as somebody, I think, Jane, you just said. So when somebody finds it impossible or very hard to establish boundaries, to protect boundaries, or to honor other people's boundaries, that's typically a case of the, or is excessively protective about boundaries. Like, don't get close to me, then we can fairly safely assume that the warrior in that moment, because it's not a for life sentence, in that moment is deflated or inflated. What are other telltale signs of warrior, either inflated, deflated, or balanced?
Busy.
Exactly, because remember, on the vertical axis, we have at the top the sovereign, which is about being, and straight down to the warrior, which is all about doing. So doing. Excessive doing not only keeps us from being, so actually makes it harder for us to access the sovereign. And again, there's in the deflated warrior, there's the absence of doing. Oh no, I don't feel like it. I can't get out of bed today. The kids must go hungry because I have a headache. Or like me, having put off 2 cold calls to organizations for months until yesterday. I just did both. Just get it done. So for some reason, my balanced warrior couldn't get online because my fear in the magician quarter was just too much. This fear of being rejected by a big organization was unthinkable. Turns out I survived. And so my warrior couldn't come online because the magician kept saying, don't call them, you're going to get rejected. And if they reject you, that's the end of a dream. And nobody likes the end of a dream, so let's not even go there, right? So also notice the interaction between the two. And then if somebody is simply willing to do whatever they need to do when they need to do it, we are probably looking at a balanced warrior. And that's the part Cliff always talks about, or somebody talks about, so now I talk about. That's the part of you that gets out of bed in the morning to feed the kids, even though your life is hell, because that's what needs to happen. That might or might not be the part of you that allows 17 kids into your house, which sounds crazy to me, because that's what needs to happen to honor the child's birthday, right? That's it. Any other thoughts, ideas, or telltale signs of warrior? What's the gateway emotion to the warrior? Anger, right? So when somebody finds it impossible to express anger, I've already said that, either impossible to express anger or excessively expresses it, then we can safely assume it's inflated or deflated warrior. And when somebody can simply say, listen, that thing you did, I'm really angry about that. That really wasn't okay by me. That sounds to me like a balanced warrior, because it expresses the emotion, it sets the boundaries in a way that's kind and compassionate. The warrior doesn't have to be abusive, and perhaps that's another way of telling warrior. So bullies, a bully is in inflated warrior, and a victim would very likely be in deflated warrior because they find it impossible to have boundaries and say no. So that's another way of telling warrior. Either the ability or inability to say no. Somebody comes at you with something, a suggestion, an invitation, or a request. Can I borrow your car? And that's really the last thing you want to do, because you don't trust them, because they make an accident a week. And then you go, yeah, sure. And then you complain to everybody else about the fact that this person has had the audacity to ask you to borrow a car, when in fact the real issue is that you had not the wherewithal to say no. Like, no, thanks for asking, and no. Lovely Byron Katie language. Or thanks for asking, and not now, which is like a gentler way of doing that. And not necessarily not now because making up a lie, because I need my car later today. That's deflated warrior, right? That's saying no with bullshit. Just a clean no. No need to explain, defend, or justify. Thanks for asking, and no, right? Avenol, you think that's funny?
Well, There are a lot of instances where I do find it hard to say.
I agree. I think that's probably true for all of us. You know, like we have sometimes there's this real desire to want to help at the expense of ourselves. I mean, I think saying no, and Liesl Tevisham, who's not with us today, she wrote a book, The Upside of Saying No. I think that's something for all of us, you know. And then when we say and then resent it afterwards, as I said, then our inclination is to blame the other as opposed to look within and go, well, what happened for me in that moment when I actually didn't have the presence to say, no, I'm not willing to do that, or I'm not willing to do that today. And thanks for asking. You know, it's like kind, it's polite, and it's very clear.
People pleasing is the big one that comes up for me in clients and self, obviously.
People pleasing.
People pleasing underneath that, I find, it can be huge rage. Actually.
Absolutely. So again, we're back to the suppress and see how these things are. That's just such a great example. So see how it's so intricately linked. When there's rage below that the person hasn't found a way to process, we are talking about putting a lid on the anger, which is deflated warrior, right? Not going there, too painful, or sometimes people have the fear, including me, that if I actually were to allow myself for it to come up, I will hurt people. And I have. With my anger, I have hurt lots of people in my life with my expressive and explosive anger. So now the lid comes on it. And when the lid comes on the anger emotion, it's virtually impossible for me to go to a balanced warrior. So now I start saying yes when I mean no. And then it just exacerbates the rage, because now I'm just, this is so beautifully interlinked. If we could help, and this is why it's the gateway emotion and not the always present emotion. And by gateway emotion, we mean until you find a way to process, though that gateway emotion, is going to be very hard for you to be balanced in that archetype. Were we in a client that is a people-pleasing person, and we suspect has a lot of rage, were we able to, either with tapping matrix, coaching, or anything else, bodywork's probably a good one to start some anger work. Were we able to safely allow them to start processing and working through and releasing the anger, there wouldn't be the need to put the lid on it. And the minute they can start naturally expressing their anger in a healthy way, they have more access to the other attributes of the warrior, which is saying no, having boundaries, and the other stuff we talked about. So it's so beautiful when we suppress, and I've never thought of it this way. When we suppress the gateway emotion, we lose access to the balanced archetype. It's kind of just as simple as that. And again, remember, it's not a 24/7 thing. I'm back to the way that I look at shame. I think it's segmented. Somebody may be a complete warrior at work, balanced warrior, and make the calls and make the decisions and have the boundaries and say yes and say no. But when they get home, they might find it impossible to express anger to their partner because they're afraid the partner will leave them. So very segmented, I think, in different areas of life, we express these archetypes differently. And that's so Cliff is more of the view. Those of you that haven't watched the video of the 12 archetypes that Eddie posted for us, Cliff is of the opinion that somebody is predominantly something. And although I think there is some truth in that, I also am hesitant, and I have been hesitant through this whole call. I mean, put it the other way. I've been fairly consistent, I hope, in warning against the danger of putting someone in a bucket. Oh, that Benny, he's an inflated warrior. Yeah, sometimes I am. But sometimes I'm also a beautiful magician. So just avoiding the temptation to necessarily put somebody in a box, because we lose something when we do that. I think we lose the ability to see somebody as a person. And when we lose the ability to see somebody as a person, it's easy for us to hurt them, deny them, ignore them, suppress them, oppress them. So let's keep seeing somebody as a bit of everything, and sometimes more expressive in one than another.
Benny, in that regard, the idea of different parts of the self come in for me.
Absolutely.
What part you're operating from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's, we could actually, in my opinion, in this context, we could replace that word with archetypes, or archetypes with part.
Yes.
So there's a part of me that steps into, or there's a part of me that is an inflated warrior. And I think the ultimate question is, what is my relationship with these different parts? and the more I despise, and we're actually going to do an exercise about self-judgment, the more I am ashamed of and embarrassed of and despise and hate my inflated warrior, in other words, the more I start putting the lid on it, that part of me is not going to be happy with that. I'm not going to be able to suppress it for long. So at some point it's going to explode. And that is one of the telltale signs that Cliff talks about in terms of archetypes, or shadow work more than archetypes, is when we suppress a part of us, let's say the inflated warrior. Because I know that I hurt people sometimes with my anger, I might be inclined to smile and be nice. When in fact, I don't feel like being smiling and being nice. I feel like putting down a boundary. But because I'm so hesitant that my anger might hurt someone, because it has in the past, and I keep suppressing it, and I keep suppressing it, and it's like a bit of a volcano, or not a bit of a volcano, it's like a volcano building up pressure. And then the last straw on the camel's back, you typically exhibit that inflated archetype and hurt people around you. Now, the minute you explode and you hurt your partner again, here comes the lid. Now I need to make doubly sure that I don't explode again. When in fact the ideal way through is to process the anger in a way that it doesn't have to be suppressed, because it's balanced and natural. And that doesn't mean that you won't sometimes lose it. Some of us do. It's just as you nod your head, Jane. Any familiarity with that concept? Yes. Bless us all is all I can say, and all our parts. All right. Anything else about the warrior? Ellie, has that been helpful?
Fantastic. It's like cogs are just going ka-tung, ka-tung, ka-tung.
Yay! Good.
Great.
I thought I was hearing something. All right. So the other one then is sovereign, right, Ellie?
Yes.
All right. If we, and I've already said this, if we look at the vertical axis and the warrior is, for some reason, Cliff put it in the south. I don't think it's really that relevant, or it's not that it's, I don't think it matters. He just have this model on the vertical axis. We have the warrior at the bottom, which is all about doing, and then the sovereign at the top. So juxtaposing it, how does the sovereign knows that it's alive? How does it like to express itself? When the warrior does doing, the sovereign does what?
Being.
Exactly. So exactly as we said before, if somebody's in doing mode, 100 miles an hour on every single committee that there is, doing everything for everybody, then we can fairly safely assume it's probably very hard for them to be. Right? This concept of being seemed to scare a lot of people. You know, I've been sitting on my balcony for the last 7 weeks, and some people think it's fabulous, but not for them. I keep talking to people about this, and they think it's a fabulous idea, and then they say, "Oh, I'm so busy, I got to go now." Like, okay, go and do what you need to do. In terms of inflated, balanced, or deflated sovereign, what are the telltale signs?
Well, shame. If they're presenting a lot of shame, they would be unbalanced.
Absolutely. So that would typically, it might push them into, well, it's interesting. It could push them into deflated sovereign or inflated. You know, somebody who's always talking big and always talking themselves up and always talking about how amazing they are and what amazing things they've done. We all know that that's likely a way to cover up the lack of self-esteem. And then paradoxically, see how they recreate the same reality. Because most of us, it's hard to be around someone like that all the time. If all they talk about is them and how amazing they are. I mean, I love hearing from people about their accomplishments and their shifts and amazing things they've done. I think that's the balanced part of the sovereign, to be able to bless self in addition to bless others. But if that's all they talk about, then typically we start avoiding those people. You know, you get to the networking event and you go to the other side of the room, or you go to the family dinner and you go make sure you sit on the other side of the table. And then when people start withdrawing from them, then it recreates the same thing of nobody wants to be around them. So it recreates the wound. And then the more wounded they are, the more they have to bolster themselves all the time. So it's a vicious cycle. And I know you know this, but it might just be worthwhile reminding all of us, it's so easy to stop seeing people as people. we start looking into their behavior. So the next time you have someone like that in your space, consider moving to a space of kindness. What might happen if you are willing to again listen to how amazing they are, and instead of just going whatever, you bless them. You actually bless them and go, oh, that's amazing, tell me more. And even if you've heard it 72 times before, listen to it a 73rd time. It might just be that your kindness, your compassion, and your blessing of them, even just paying attention to them and displaying a desire to be around them, exhibit or communicating to them that their way of being, because that's a sovereign, is about being, that their way of being is okay, and that you accept their way of being. That is a huge blessing. You know, I've often said, I think the biggest gift we can give anybody is to allow them and welcome the way they express themselves. Now, of course, that's a lot easier some days than others, you know, depending what the agenda is. Anything else about the sovereign?
Controlling. Is that sovereign?
So there's I want to go briefly back to the magician and the warrior. The warrior is the bully that just rides a rough shot over everybody, either physically hits them, beats them, or verbally abuses them. The abuser is also, we already said that, in the warrior. The magician can also be a bully of sorts, but we use the word manipulator there, because the magician will do it in a way that you don't even see it coming. Maybe you know people like that. They just always seem to get their way. You're like, how the hell did that happen? I went into that conversation knowing I was going to say no, and now I've ended up saying yes, and it actually felt good for a while. Like, how the hell did they do that? Magician, right? Master manipulators, sleek, sly, no scruples often. They get what they get. So the same thing applies for me around, what's the word you just used, Jane, for the sovereign?
Controlling.
Absolutely.
Right.
So
rigid.
Yeah.
Or my way or the highway.
Exactly. Now that can also live in the warrior, or perhaps it's more about, I'm making this up as I go along. Maybe it's about a relationship between an inflated sovereign and a warrior, because I want to talk a little bit today about archetypes being in service of the sovereign. If we have a dictator in place, like we don't have to look too far in South Africa or outside of South Africa for dictators, past or present, the dictator might come up with the way Jane said, my way or the highway. You know, they start changing the constitution, they change the laws, they put people in place that's their cronies. I mean, you know, not that we have anything like that happening in South Africa at the moment, or have had for the last whatever year. So so dictator would definitely be an inflated sovereign, and exactly the same as we said about the warrior. When I step into my inflated sovereign or deflated sovereign, I lose my connection and ability to be in the balanced sovereign. A dictator is unable to bless. And somebody who is deflated sovereign often compensates for that by blessing and I think, Jane, you said the bejesus out in a previous call. One of you used the word that I didn't want to say out loud, out of people in a way to compensate for their own lack of self-esteem. So it'll be very grandiose and just overly, like, people go like, what was that? You know, making this extensive speech at the wedding for 2 hours and 27 minutes and all that type of stuff. Anything else about the sovereign?
Yes, on the last call, you mentioned that the sovereign accepts what is.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting, the process that I had afterwards, because in that call you suggested that we accept, and we help our clients to accept things like a terminal illness or whatever. And what I noticed about myself is that is one of the hardest things for me to do, because I don't want the person to suffer, but I want to change it. So as a practitioner, I have to be very aware of not allowing that to come in. And that, if I'm honest, has been a motivation of mine forever. As a social worker, I want to make things better for people. Since that call, I've had to take a step back and watch that within myself and work with coming to acceptance within my own life, within my clients' lives, within my family. So that for me, that was like a realization moment, Benny. I just wanted to share that.
Good. Now notice again, in the DBT, the dialectical behavioral therapy that I'm involved in at the moment or undergoing, dialectical means two things existing at the same time, or two apparently opposing things, existing at the same time. So it could be a both and, Carol. What I know about you is you are a caring person, right? Or let me rephrase. There's a part of you that is a caring person. To try and suppress that is suppressing your lover. Okay, I mean you know that. So I think the mindfulness aspect is about when the lover might become inflated, and you being more concerned than the client, or you're like really care or having sleepless nights about your client, kind of stuff like that, overly caring or overly caretaking of, which we know is not only a heavy burden on self, but it's also, I think, denying the client to really do their own work in some ways. So I like the phrase that you said about being mindful about that. I don't know the exact words that you used. For the sovereign to just be aware of that part of you that might become inflated, because there's something very beautiful about caring for our clients. And the dialectical approach, which is really fascinating stuff, is about the therapist or the practitioner finding the balance between accepting what is absolutely and supporting towards change.
Yes.
That's
I think I'm on that journey. Definitely.
Yeah. It's the both and rather than the either or.
Yeah.
It's not like we accept or we do something about it. It's both.
Yeah.
We accept what is and we do something about it. And in that vein, what I suggest in your quiet time, contemplate this, everybody this is for. Have a chat with somebody else on the call or somebody else that you trust and start getting clarity on what the difference is for you about an accepting sovereign, a surrendering sovereign, and an abdicating sovereign. Because we can sometimes use this concept of accepting what is as an excuse to abdicate. Oh, well, if the world is the way it is, well, there we go. I'll just watch TV all day. Can't do anything about it anyway. Well, if this client has cancer, they're going to die. So whatever. What's the point of therapy, right? We can easily abdicate. And then when we abdicate in our own lives, we become rudderless and directionless and purposeless. And that stuff, I believe, strongly out of my own experience, leads to depression and all sorts of other, what we might call, I don't know, mental illness or disturbances in whatever you want to call it.
Benny, sorry, what's the difference between abdicating and surrendering? Is it not the same thing?
Well, that's my invitation for you to consider what it means to you. Here's how I see that. And I'm going to trust that you will come to your own conclusions and not just take what I say. This is my interpretation of it. For me, if there was a war between two kings, and the one king was clearly outnumbered and outwitted and outskilled and out everything, and they either lost the battle or it was clear they are going to lose the battle, then here's what I think an abdicating king might do. I'm going to go, okay, you know what? We screwed and I'm fleeing the country. You guys sort yourselves out. A surrendering king might do the both and, accepting what is, surrendering to the other side, going to the other king, shaking his hand, saying, you win. Now how do we work from here? In other words, staying in the game, staying present, totally accepting what is. In other words, being the opposite of bitter or resentful or aggressive or passive aggressive, any of that stuff. It's like really staying in the game. Okay, I accept defeat. This is what happened. Somebody might lose.
Benny,
yes.
Is that a balanced sovereign when he does that?
I would say that the balanced king knows which battles to fight and knows which one to leave. You work in a big organization and you hate the culture and you hate everything. Well, yeah, there is that old saying, you have to be on the inside to change things, but really, if you don't have, like, I don't have the personality or the skill or the desire to turn around a company of 10,000 people. I'm not a visionary type person in that sense. I don't, it's not my thing. I don't get traction in that way. So then I might need to surrender and go, you know what? This is not the place for me. And I'm going to find a job somewhere else that is fulfilling. The abdicating king might just go in every day and bitch and complain and do whatever, but do nothing about it, but just stay in resentment all the time. For me, that would be abdicating my own well-being. And then, you know, that leads, as we all know, to all sorts of emotional hoo-ha. Anything else about, yes, Carol, go ahead.
Yes, one other thing. Sorry, I'm just thinking of Nelson Mandela, since we're talking about South Africa's dictators. Could we say that on the whole he would be a balanced sovereign, because he blessed us.
He did.
He blessed the whole world, I think.
He did. And also, he accepted defeat gracefully. He was sent to prison for, I think, 27 years. And here's the other thing. He stayed in the game. He stayed in the game. They had their secret talks and things that they weren't allowed to do theoretically. He kept studying. He had a library in his room. You know, he became qualified as a lawyer. No, he was already a lawyer before. I don't remember. He might have become something. I don't know if he got a qualification in prison or before that. I don't remember. But he stayed in the game totally. Stayed committed to the change, what they called the struggle. And apparently every time because you can see Table Mountain from Robben Island. Robben Island's about 13 kilometers off the coast of Cape Town. So you can see the mountain. The mountain is massive. And apparently, you know, story goes that every time he looked at that mountain, he dreamt, because that's a characteristic of the sovereign. He dreamt of a day that his people would be free. And I mean, eventually, you know, you could argue that that happened. To what extent it's happened, well, that's probably up for a debate some other time. But he stayed true to his dream and his vision to lead his people to freedom. And then when it actually happened, it would have been the easiest thing in the world. Remember that what we call his people, black people in this country, outnumber the white and other people by factors. He could have become a dictator without blinking twice. Easy. He could have rallied his people. They've been suppressed for decades. They were raging. It could have been bloodshed in the streets. And he decided to go another route. He says, we need the skills of white people in this country. I want you to stay. Please don't go. That, for me, that blessing, Carol, as you said, I mean, I don't know where he got that from. That's deep. Now, apparently in private, he did sometimes express resentment. That's not strange. He was locked up for 27 years, but his public persona, he did not allow that to come in there. He stayed blessing, he stayed reassuring, and even the way that he spoke so beautifully, slowly, was all about the beautiful, graceful, sovereign king in all his power. There was no... Because here's just notice the lovely balance again. He was such a lover, right? He had such a warm heart. The way he spoke to children and his charities did such good work. But at the same time, when he entered the room, it was very clear who was the king. He didn't have to scream and shout and tell us how amazing he was. He just was. His way, listen again, his way of being just exuded his sovereign qualities. There was just no question who he was and what his purpose was in life. So in terms of the surrendering, that's my take on surrendering and abdicating. And then somewhere in there, in that mix, there is accepting, and maybe the acceptance needs to happen before surrendering. I don't quite know. I'm still working with those three concepts. I often give my clients that same question. And it's quite amazing what comes up for them when they realize how they have actually abdicated their own life. They've given the power to their partner, or the fear about their partner might leave them, or they've given their power to the boss. And it's quite, I wouldn't say shocking, but it's quite revealing for some to actually realize how they have abdicated their own lives, stuck in a job they hate for 20 years, and so on and so on. Caro?
I was just thinking when I was doing a quick sort of scan through the document just to refresh my memory this morning, and for I was quite interested in thinking about couples. So I was specifically thinking about my ex-husband and how when we were together, he very definitely always sees the inflated position. And I sort of just, I suppose you could call it abdicating in a way, but there didn't seem much choice for me but to be like, I had to play in the deflated area of the relationship.
Yeah.
And it really was quite striking.
Hmm.
I don't know why but in all the archetypes, when I looked at inflated and deflated, that was for me what made it really so horrible, was that I kind of, maybe I was more comfortable being in the inflated side myself, or at least I was always looking for the middle way, to find a compromise between extreme behavior and fine, okay behavior, or to find some way that it was always doing the peacemaking. But it was very interesting to see and to just be aware of how unpleasant it was to be pushed into the deflated side when it's not actually where you were before you entered that relationship. And it was quite startling. Just an aha moment.
Good. And here's I want to call it poetic thing about it. If I were to, or anybody were to explore your childhood past with you, you will see that the beliefs that you took on, that was what caused you to go into deflated. Your beliefs about self, about relationships, about love, about that stuff.
I could lay on for hours about that, but I'm not going to. But yeah, I can see
and the same for him. Again, when you look at his past, you will see it could not have been any other way. Exactly. So in that case, it's perfect, because you are in the cycle. That's why they say victims always find bullies, and bullies always find victims.
Yes, absolutely.
And there is, of course, even though it's painful, there is a sense of comfort. If and this is not necessarily you, because I don't know enough about you to make this about you, but let's say a woman grows up, let's say a man grows up, let's for a change just reverse the stereotype roles. A man grows up believing that he's not worthy to be loved. He meets a woman who is an inflated warrior and an inflated sovereign, and she's just rude and cold and shunts him around and orders him around. In his belief system, he does not deserve better than that. He doesn't. So as a client, if he's our client, the wound is very likely in the sovereign. He's unable to bless himself and be in love with his way of being in the world, and doesn't believe that's good enough. So his self-esteem would be low, and he would think, well, at least I have this person in my life. I don't deserve better than this. There's no point in leaving, because this is what I deserve. This is the way it should be. Of course, the painful thing is this is 99% unconscious. It's on autoplay. He may actually go to therapy and say, I hate it when she speaks to me that way. But until we as practitioners can identify the wound in the sovereign and start blessing him and start giving him homework and do some healing work around blessing himself, it's very unlikely that the relationship will end. Or if he ends it or she ends it, guess what? 3 months later, he meets an amazing woman, and she's so loving and kind until the wedding night.
Yeah, well, I think for me it was it was a long struggle to kind of it was where I gave up on the idea of that you can help someone, but I could see I'd done a lot more work I was a lot more conscious of what the problems were. He was very unconscious of the problems, or why he might be this way, or whatever. So I mean, I spent a long time trying to be the voice of reason, but it's you are just wasting your breath if somebody is completely unconscious of A, how they're coming across, and B, why they might be the way they are. What might be the source of if they're not interested, it's just nothing to be done.
So I would suggest that, we sometimes think we're the voice of reason, but in fact, I think it's more true to say we are the voice of our reason.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
our reason is different to your
I
reason.
just gave it up. That's all you can do is just
Exactly.
give it up.
So the
But-
gateway emotion is shame.
Yeah.
So in addition to the blessing part that I said I think would be essential, remember that we also have to excavate. You
Yeah.
can't just bless and then shame goes away. You need to do the shame work. And that's why it's the gateway emotion, in my opinion. Cliff and I differ on that. And when we can help somebody do their shame work, they are more likely to be able to access the balanced sovereign, which includes blessing of self and potentially blessing his abusive partner and loving her enough to leave. Because I agree, Cara, that thing of, I'll change. One of the things in my
good luck with that.
Exactly. One of the things in my last relationship that was a point of contention was our way of experiencing time was different. Like when I say 2 minutes, I typically mean 2 minutes. And when he said 9 o'clock, it didn't necessarily mean 9 o'clock. And it was not, he was a love. Some of you've met him. He's a lovely, amazing, gorgeous being. He's a dancer. So his mind is just not on time. So he might say 10 minutes and then he gets engrossed in a new song or a new choreography or something. And before he knows, it's 2 hours later.
Yeah.
And then I went last night to friends for dinner and I drove past the place where we met. So it was kind of a sad experience. And I remember the very first time that we met face to face, he was 20 minutes late.
So you should have seen that coming.
I kind of knew. I remember exactly where I was sitting waiting and thinking, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to get upset? Am I going to say something? And of course, because I really liked him, I didn't even mention it. We just carried on as if it wasn't time. And for him, there was nothing odd about it. Because it's his way. One of my clients always said she's going to write a book. The signs are always there. We're just going to choose to ignore them.
The trouble is you don't want to look at them, because of other things that you're seeing, which are much more juicy and interesting. So you'll just ignore that problem. It's not a problem.
All right. So remember also that the feeling of joy can come forward when we are in balanced sovereign. So, telltale sign, when somebody finds no joy in their life, you can very safely assume that there is some sovereign work to do. When somebody has a natural sense of joy, just think about it. Many, many, many years ago, Lester Levinson, who created the Sedona method, he started pondering the question, when was he the happiest? When had he been the happiest in his life? And then first he came up with this idea that it was when he was being loved. But those were really happy times. But then when he looked deeper, he realized whenever he was loved, there was the underlying fear that the love would be taken away. So in fact, those weren't their happiest times. Their happiest times, he realized, and when you look at it, you will find that it's true, was when he was being loving. Those are the happiest times. So why I'm bringing this into the conversation here, like I was sitting on my balcony the other day and a woman in the complex, she walks her dog and it's this gorgeous, gorgeous dog. And my face just broke out in this big smile. And I was like, oh, he's so cute and fluffy. And I just want to take him home. Immediate joy. While I was being loving, the dog wasn't being loving to me, didn't even notice me. So the reason I say that is when we are able to express our joy, it is likely, or an experience joy, it is likely that it will be fairly easy for us to bless ourselves and others. Because when you are in a joyful mode, it's easy to bless. When you feel good about yourself, you don't even care about the guy cutting you off from the traffic. You actually make space for him. Go. And doesn't that just feel good? Yes, it does. And then there's a part of you, of course, that wants him to say thank you. And if he doesn't, you get all bent out of shape. But anyway. Anything else about the sovereign?
Well, I was working with somebody last night. I was asked by a friend to look after this person who was feeling suicidal, in fact. And talk about low sovereign and low lover. And so as he started sort of telling me the story of how he'd fallen out of love with his wife, but I sensed there was something else. So we just focused on, obviously you focus on the body first. But as we brought him out and we brought him out, what actually happened in the end was he realized that he really, really loved his wife. And he realized that he had these great skills and these great things to offer the world, and that he really, truly loved his children and just wanted the best for his children. And I said, well, what is the best for your children? He said, me.
Wow.
And he realized he was a good dad. And so he was
Wow.
totally blessing himself at the end. We went from completely low sovereign, low lover to very balanced sovereign, balanced lover. It was
Isn't that
really
just
beautiful.
yummy to be able
Yeah,
to do
really
that with
yummy.
someone? Like, yes.
And that would have been one of my happiest moments, because I was doing what I do well, which is a lover. It's my kind of thing. And I realized as you were talking that actually that's the state I always bring my clients to from wherever they are. That's my goal for them, is to come into that balanced lover, balanced sovereign, so that they can then see who they are, and then they can start to work on the things that don't work for them. It's just I just wanted to share because it was just so beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful. And you reminded me of something else when you started speaking about this particular person. Also part of the sovereign is purpose, life vision, having a sense of the bigger picture. Spirituality or religion would be in this quadrant of sovereign. So again, there's always the two-way traffic. When somebody is low sovereign, it's going to be very hard for them to find a purpose in life. Conversely, when somebody is just drifting through life without purpose, it's going to be very hard for them to access the balanced sovereign. Right? There's two entry points. So if somebody is low sovereign and is directionless, then you can either start working on blessing self, and then when self-value comes more online, they would become more clear on life purpose. Or like a coach, for example, some coaches don't do regression work. It's all looking forward. It's all about goal setting. So they might do some work on getting clear on their life purpose, and once they find that, would pull them to balanced sovereign. So remember, there's always the two entry points. And when we have the deflated part, we can work on the behavior, or we can work on the actual emotion, either way. Does that make sense? The two-way street? Good. So again, let's take the same example for the warrior. When somebody is deflated warrior, it's going to be very hard for them to access balanced warrior to, for example, have boundaries. Now, so if a client comes in and they find it impossible to set boundaries, you can either work with them and help them to start setting small boundaries, and there's some very specific examples in your workbook about getting them to say no without giving a reason and stuff like that. Or you can start working on the anger. And as the anger gets processed or released, they will automatically find it easier to start saying no and having boundaries. I shared on these calls with you like for 4 months, since the middle of January until whenever these calls started. I was binge eating to a that I'd never have. And I'm no stranger to binge eating. It's happened various times in my life, but this was something out of this world. And then I start sitting on the balcony and start doing my grief work, and those cravings dissipated. They disappeared. I never, ever, ever tapped on, even though I have these cravings. I simply allowed myself to start falling into grief, food cravings, addictions, love a quarter. Grief work, love a quarter. Started doing my grief work, cravings gone. So 2 entry points. Doesn't matter which way you want to look at it. I'm suggesting that as long as you're aware of the 2 entry points, because I do think it's an important facet of these archetypal work, there's no, this is a better way than the other. It's just that you're mindful of 2 ways. And perhaps you just have a sense, what would be the quickest win for a client, even if it's a small win? Like that guy from Leslie last night, he got a big one, but somebody is suicidal, even a small one is helpful in the moment. And then if one avenue doesn't work, then you still have the other avenue. Same with magician. If somebody is constantly in fear, they will very likely go deflated or inflated magician. So you can help them work through the fear. And the fear probably comes from some painful beliefs they took on when they were children, like the world isn't safe, I'm going to get hurt, all that stuff. So you can work on the emotion of fear, or on the other side, so the two-way thing, how would that work for the magician? Oh, you can help them you can help them get into the strength of the magician, which is insight and perspective and clarity and wisdom and hibernation and introspection. And as the more they begin, hopefully this will come out of the exercise I suggest we do a bit later, is the more insight and perspective they get, like, well, actually, like that's what happened with me yesterday. I realized the worst that could happen is these two corporations could say, thanks, not interested, bye for now. As it is, I have one coffee date and I'm waiting for the other one to come back to me. So having the perspective alleviated the fear enough for me to actually make those two calls. Or we could have worked on the fear, which would have given them more insight. Once the fear dissipates, clarity comes. Like, my goodness, it's 2 phone calls, you know? It's not the end of my world. All right, Ellie, how does that all sound?
Excellent. Yeah, just a question that's coming up for me. Which archetype would be a passive-aggressive person?
Okay, let's put that to the group. Passive-aggressive. The dog's just walking past. He's such a sweetie.
I can tell you the answer to that. I think the sovereign, the deflated, the inflated, the sovereign.
Deflated, I would say.
Deflated.
I think passive-aggressive people are deflated.
Deflated.
I don't know. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Well, we're speculating. We're not getting to right and wrong yet.
Warrior. Deflated warrior or inflated warrior?
Okay, anybody else have a thought?
I don't know.
Maybe a deflated warrior, yeah. Huh?
Okay.
I think it's a combination.
Yes.
I think it's a combination of deflated warrior and deflated sovereign.
And I hear narcissist in there, is what I hear.
Huh.
Passive aggressive. That usually suggests, doesn't it, that you don't like yourself.
Okay, Megan?
I was also thinking the magician, because there's kind of, it's quite manipulative in a way, but it's not subtle, I suppose. It's kind of, just maybe more subtle than that.
So again, remember, you know, these lines aren't always black and white, and there's overlap and all that stuff. For me, the only reason that I would become passive aggressive is because I don't have the presence to express my anger cleanly. So for me, I'm suppressing for the reasons I said before. I was on a call last night, and I was setting some boundaries, and I kept, as I was saying, and I thought, I hope I don't sound angry, because I'm not. I'm just making it clear what I'm willing to do and what not. And it still bugged me this morning. You know, if I had a recording of the call, I would have listened to it again to make sure that my voice was just even, because setting boundaries for me sometimes is hard because I associate it with aggression. So just for me, the reason for me becoming passive aggressive is because I don't know of a healthy way to express the anger. And for me, that would indicate a deflated warrior. And again, there's probably as you said, there's probably a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But if I had to pick one for me, I would pick the warrior.
The reason why I said deflated warrior is because the key is aggression. The word is aggressive. So
exactly.
For me, that's what points it to anger.
I agree.
And a person who's passive aggressive is not. They are actually angry. Have you ever seen a teenager? If you've got teenagers that are passive aggressive, there's anger sitting underneath all of that for me anyway.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's the same. Go ahead.
But it's like an angry victim as well.
Exactly.
Which is very unpleasant.
I agree, and I think there's sometimes even rage under it, but it's not safe to express the rage. Let's say in an abusive relationship, every time, if you start getting angry at your alcoholic husband, he beats you. So you can't afford to be angry with him, but you're probably seething underneath. And then a safer way of expressing that anger is passive aggression. Just saying it in a way that, it's just, trying to put a lid on the anger, perhaps. Does that help, Ellie?
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you.
All right, good. We'll take one more question for now, if there is, and we're going to do some practical, and then we'll come back and answer more questions if there are. So anybody else with a question? Going. Aminal?
No, I had wanted to, but I've forgotten what it is now.
Okay, so what archetype would that be? Deflated magician, right? Lack of clarity. Or you could just say it's, genetic. Passive aggressively blaming your parents for your lack of memory. All right. So I came up with a little script this morning, and I mean, I'll post it here so you can see it. Please appreciate that this little script I just created it this morning. This is not a shadow work practice or an archetypal stuff. This is the reason I say that is I really want you to start playing with the stuff. This is why I wanted to host this additional call. I really want you to get this into your bones, because the minute you get this into your bones, you can start becoming creative with it, playing with it, coming up with all exercises. Now, the magician is is probably my favorite archetype because it's my way of being in the world. I know that I'm alive and I love expressing myself by teaching. I love it more than anything else I found in this world. So I know that's kind of my strong place. And also on a good day, I'm fairly intelligent. I can reason things out. I can solve technical problems, and I can have a decent conversation. And also when clients speak to me, without me needing to do anything, I kind of connect dots. It's one of the things my brain does. It connects dots and find relationships and see patterns and ask questions that I didn't think of that comes out of my mouth. So for me, I don't know if I said this, but I'll say it now. Elizabeth Gilbert, in her book Big Magic, which I love that book, she says in the old days or previous times, people didn't speak and said, I am a genius or so-and-so is a genius, but said, I have a genius or so-and-so has a genius. And I just love that idea. So it's not like I'm a genius with client work, but I have this genius that comes to me. And I mean, yesterday I did a session for somebody, and it was about 1 minute, 45 seconds into it when I asked a question that I did not consider asking, and suddenly the whole thing unraveled and opened. And she's like, you're so good at this. Well, thank you. But it wasn't necessarily me. It was the magician in me that just, I don't know where this stuff comes from. So I'm going to share the process with you. I want to demonstrate it first. So there's no need to write it down unless that's your way of learning. Then please write it down. I will copy and paste it later. And also the script might change. That's the other thing with scripts. I like script because for people like me, who's sometimes a slow learner, I want the safety of the script because that gives me confidence to actually try the process. And then when I know the script, it's time to veer off. So I'd like a volunteer, please, this will be a magician piece. So it might or might not evoke emotion. That's not the point. If it does, great. If it doesn't, great. It's a magician piece. And notice that as I lead the person through the process, I have no agenda with these questions other than asking questions to the person so that they can plant their own seeds, not mine, for change. You'll see also, I don't care if they say yes or no to the question. It doesn't matter to me. I have a response for either one. And we can talk about that after the process. If they say yes, I go down this way. If they say no, I go down that way. Hopefully also I'll be able to demonstrate the real utter curiosity that I have about the responses. I'm like, oh, wow, really? Like, tell me more. Like, and then using the response as the next step and using that response as the next step, which of course just comes with practice. You know, there's no magic to it. There's just doing the hard work of practicing and setting up swap sessions and doing your work. It's just, once you've done thousands of sessions, it's a bit easier. So who would like to be the guinea pig for this process that has never, ever been done before? Megan, I saw your hand go up first. Thanks, Monique, for being willing. Megan, you unmuted?
Yes.
All right, feel free to tap. Everybody feel free to tap or not tap as you wish. So remember, this is magician. So I might use some lover language because that's kind of my way of working with clients. I might, in a minute, when I come out of teacher archetype into practitioner archetype, one of the first things I'll probably do unconsciously is to speak a little slower. Okay, because I'm like in teacher mode and there's all exciting and there's all these concepts and connecting more dots and all that stuff. And now this is different because we want to come down a little bit. So make a nice, deep, gentle breath in and out. Stretch the body if you'd like to. And then, Megan, what is one limiting belief you have about yourself? Perhaps something like, I'm not good enough, I'm pathetic, I'm stupid, or something like that.
If I show who I really am, people will turn away.
Okay, so that's a fear you have. And that fear is based on what belief you have about yourself.
I want to say I'm not good enough, and and there's probably more to it there. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not good enough is a good start. Is there anything else that comes to mind when you think of I'm not good enough?
Sort of, I'm not worthy, I think, in some way. Yeah.
Okay, so it's okay if we go with that one. I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
Is that actually true that you're not worthy? How do you know?
If I were to say how I know it from my experience as a child. Intellectually, I know that probably isn't 100% true.
Okay, so we'll get to that, but for the moment we're focusing on what feels true to you, even though there's a part of you that knows that it's not true intellectually. It still feels true in some ways. So how else do you know, or what other proof do you have, put it that way, that you are not worthy?
What I have to offer sometimes gets missed in a group. Sometimes when I share something, it won't be heard, and then someone else might say it later on, and somebody would go, "Oh, wow, that's amazing," even though I've said it first. There's something about kind of, being, it's like sort of a core thing of me that's not worthy, because it's, I don't know if I'm making any sense.
You are. And what other proof do you have that you are not worthy?
That I have to fight really hard to get what I want. If I was really worthy, that it might come a little bit more easily.
Yeah.
Or easier. Yeah.
Okay. And make a nice deep breath in and out. Stretch the body if it would like to. Now, what does it mean to you? I'm going to just say back to you the 4 things that I heard you say. What does it mean to you that what you have to offer sometimes gets missed in a group? You share something, is not being heard. Somebody else says it and people are like, oh, wow. That there's something about your being, like a core thing of you that's not worthy. And that you have to fight really hard to get what you want. What does all of that mean to you?
It's the part of me that's the real part of me is kind of invisible or not valuable in some way.
And is that true in all parts of your life?
No.
So tell me about where that's not true for you.
In how I parent my daughter, Olivia, yeah.
Any other places or times where it's not true for you that there's a part of you that's invisible and not valuable?
I think when I'm a therapist, I can see that,
So when you're a therapist, you can see what?
I can see the value I bring to the session. I can see how I can help someone. Sorry about that.
And what value is it that you bring to the session, knowing that she's right next to you?
It's not Anthea.
What?
It's not Anthea.
I know, but who was
I
it?
don't know. It's not on. Sorry about that.
That's all right. What value do you bring to your client sessions?
Acceptance for who they are. Yeah.
So what does it mean to you that as a practitioner that you can see the value you bring to the session, and one of those values is acceptance, and also the value in the way that you parent your daughter? What does that mean to you?
Oh, these questions, like my brain. It's like, and I can feel emotion coming up.
What emotion is coming up?
Grief.
About?
Grief, how hard it is for me to see what I can do. Yeah.
And it's hard for you to see what you can do because
I've been told those parts of me are not valuable, or or those parts haven't really been seen. Yeah.
So then back to where you can see in terms of the way you parent Olivia and the value that you bring to client sessions, including acceptance. What does that mean to you?
And I can feel a catch in my throat as I try and say it. It means that I do have something to offer, and I can bring something into the world.
You can, or you do?
I do.
What happens when you say that?
It's hard to say, and I can see how I skirt around it, but when I actually say it, it's a bit of a, oh yeah, actually I do. It's a bit of a release.
Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. So nice stretch again, in and out. So thank you for working along with me on that. So that's the end of that particular little process.
Thank you.
I'm going to send you the questions that I had planned. And then also I put some of Megan's responses in between. Based on her response, we danced a little bit, right? Dance and weave. That's kind of just the thing. You can have all the scripts in the world, but then when you can actually track the client, I think you have a better way. Also, this process, I don't know how long that took, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, I have no idea. You can use that as an intervention. So this would not necessarily be the whole session, but this is a great question, based on what Megan shared and where we left that exercise, if this was a tapping session and you still had 50 minutes left, where would you suggest you and Megan go next? Or let's start perhaps with archetypes, since this is an archetypal call. Carol.
I would encourage the sovereign to come online. So I'd do a lot of blessing and encouraging her to see her value and to start blessing herself. I think that would be wonderful.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would want to know when was the first time she felt that way to try and get back to where it started.
Yeah, that was my feeling too.
Okay, Carol, same thing. Anybody else? Which archetype is most wounded based on this conversation only?
Lover.
How did you get to that, Jane?
In a child. I'm not worthy, I'm invisible, I'm invaluable.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'd say it's the sovereign.
Right. Anybody else?
Well, I thought about the magician because she's not seeing herself.
Okay. So
As she really is. Yeah.
in this, okay, so this is fabulous. So much to teach. I would say this is a sovereign wound mostly because that's where self-esteem lives and blessing lives. And what I'm hearing is that or what I heard, it's very hard for Megan to bless herself. Even when I asked her what it means to her that she does bring value, what came up was grief and a catch in the throat. So it's not easy. Also, I know Megan, so I already know that about her. So I'm giving myself license to use everything I know about a client to be able to help them. Sometimes I know things about clients that they don't know I know about them because their partner told me. I keep that for myself, right? Because otherwise I'm breaching confidentiality with someone who gave me that information. I mean, sometimes people just give me information that I didn't necessarily want. Now, Cara, your suggestion of magician, this process that I just took Megan through, which archetype is that? I already told you that before we started, but I want to remind her.
Magician.
It's a magician process, okay? So shame also lives in the sovereign. And in my opinion, the reason why it's hard for Megan to bless herself is I would suspect there's some shame happening in there. Now the next question is, let's say that's true. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's an assumption I made based on my experience and what I'm feeling in this moment. Now, the next question is, which tool do I use? And if you've read the shame document on my website, one of the tools I suggest for shame work is the magician, because it gives them insight and perspective. And as in this case, it's given us 2 clues. The one thing that came up was grief. Grief is, as Jane said, is in the lover quarter. So we might, after this short little piece of intervention, magician intervention, to get some more information and distance and clarity. Also, what I know about these types of processes, consciously or unconsciously, the seeds that Megan just planted in herself, I'd be curious to see where that takes her. Maybe 5 years from now. It's none of my business what happens next. So the grief thing would be one, so we might do some lover work. And actually, by using the close your eyes, and when you feel this grief, where do you feel it? And using some clean language to follow up, right? Grief, she told us grief was coming up, so go with it into the body. The other thing that was really interesting for me is the catch in the throat. So I might want to spend some more time in the body, which is also lover, and experience and explore this catch in the throat. And then using Monique's question, after we have, so this is chasing the energy technique in Matrix, right? You have every single one of you who have done Matrix or been in a Matrix class. Chasing the energy. So this catch in the throat, what's it like? What does it feel like? Intensify the feeling. What color does it have? What shape does it have? How big is it? Is it hot or cold? Is it inside or outside? You know, all those typical questions we ask. Not all of them, but some of them. And then get her to focus on the feeling rather than the story we've been telling. And then ask her in the soft, gentle, lover voice with lots of pauses. And when was the very first time you ever felt that red, scratchy, itchy catch in your throat? And 9 times out of 9, kabam, we're back at age 4. Teacher told her she's useless. Hello, welcome life, right? Or whatever memory comes up. Those
Bennie?
not in. Yes, Megan.
Sorry, I know a lot of the work that I do with people can be pre-verbal, and if it's pre-verbal, often you can't come up with a time or a place. It's just like a sense. What would you do then?
Well, in my experience, when it's very rare for me that question doesn't go somewhere, because it's not. I agree, it's pre-verbal, and that's why we focus on the body sensation. We're not asking when was the first time you believed that you're unworthy. We said, when was the first time you felt this itchy, scratchy catch in your throat? If, however, and for some clients, it's just like blank, nothing comes up, I would get them to guess.
Okay.
Just guess. And if that's impossible for them to do, or it's too risky for them to do because like me, they're afraid they're going to get it wrong, then the next thing I might do is say, give me a number between 0 and 10. If they say 5, I say before birth or after birth. Whatever they say, I say weeks or months. months. 5 months after birth, good. 5 months after birth, good. Now, then I will reassure them, it is very unlikely that you have any conscious memories of this time. Some people do, most of us don't. So just imagine a 5-month-old Benny. Where do you see him? And we're in the matrix. So first step is really trust the process and perhaps revisit in your matrix manual the bit of chasing the energy. When it's done well, it typically works. When that doesn't work, get them to guess. And when that doesn't work, get them to give a number. I have never in all my time had a client that when they came up with a number, we didn't find a relevant memory. Fascinating. Absolutely. If you do muscle testing, you might consider doing muscle testing. I mean, it's going to take a bit longer, but if that's your thing, or kinesiology, or whatever it is. Oh, you haven't done matrix. Sorry, Megan, I thought you did. I was confusing you with, not confusing you, but confusing the course with Falling in Love with Presenting, which you did. Yeah, it's well worth learning. Jean Booth has been talking to Carl. Carl Dawson might come out to South Africa at some point and perhaps train Jean or somebody else. Oh, yeah, and the book that Monique is holding up. Yeah, that's, I mean, that book explains the process, not obviously in as much detail, but certainly the basic stuff. All right, anything else about this process? Gone. Good. So I'm just going to, in fact, how am I going to do this? I'm going to leave out the bits that Megan gave me, which I typed in between. So let me quickly take that out. Okay, it's going to take me 2 minutes to do that. So while I do that, so that you don't look at me doing that, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and you just have a few minutes. It'll probably be 2 or 3 minutes. Have a chat about anything that's come up on the call today. So invitation on your screen, and I will call you back when it's time. Anything interesting come from your conversations? Brownie recipes, meditation techniques, ways to win the lottery, anything?
Megan and I were talking about her session, and I said it was quite amazing because I can remember being exactly the same way and wondering why I couldn't be heard when I'm such a loud person. And as she went through, I went, wow, you know, that was so big in my life, and it's not now, but I'm really quite triggered by that. That's awesome. I've got some work to do. That's what it
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to copy this in the chat, and then we're going to talk through it. And then you're going to go and play. Everybody got the chat? Anybody not got the chat?
Do we open it up? What do we do?
Yeah, you click on the word chat at the bottom of the screen, and then it'll open up a little white text box.
Okay.
You got it?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So I call this a magician intervention because it's a short process to give clues and direction to the process. I mean, it could in itself, it takes 5 or 10 minutes. So this is not something that you can do for an hour to give insight and clues and direction to the session. So the first thing is you ask the client, after you've given a bit of nice deep breath in and out, stretch the body, have some water, you know, just kind of connecting with the client. Tell me a belief that you have about yourself. And then I like giving people examples, because when you give them examples, they actually know what you mean. Like it could be something about yourself, like I'm pathetic, or I'm stupid, or I'm not good enough, or something like that. When I asked Megan the question, what did she respond with?
I'm not worthy.
Before she said that.
Didn't give you a belief. She started off with a sort of a feeling, and you had to narrow it down to say, to get to the belief.
She said that if she, I don't know, remember the exact word, expresses herself or gets visible or something, then she's going to get hurt, something to that effect, which wasn't answering my question. But I wasn't going to say, no, that's wrong. That's not what I meant. Listen to when I speak to you. God damn it, woman. Because that was not going to be conducive to a lovely client relationship. It shut her down, even if I did it less overt and go, no, that's not what I mean. I mean something about you. Even that subtle no, there's like 5 no's in one sentence. It doesn't do anything to open people up. It just shuts her down. She's been told no, she's wrong enough times in her life. I'm not going to be the next one. So when she said that, what she said was an expectation or a fear. And what we know about expectations or fears, they're based on a belief. So I rephrased the question. Also know that when a client doesn't give you the response that you wanted, and you ask them the same question in the same way, you might get the same response. Because the question didn't land the way that you asked it, because their way of learning and understanding is different. So see if you can rephrase the question, come up with more examples, kindly, compassionately, patiently. For example, I'm pathetic, I'm stupid. It came with a bit of facilitation, we came to not worthy. Now the next question is simply, is that true? Or if you want to be more specific, is it true that you're not worthy? Then you wait. She might say yes, she might say no. Whichever one she says, you go to the next one. How do you know it's true? Give me some proof. Now, initially I said, how do you know it's true? Then she gave me one or two. And then I said, give me some more proof. How else do you know that you are not worthy? So you dig for more, you ask anything else, and whatever she says, you welcome it, you normalize it, or you could say, okay, good. Any other ways that any other proof you have that you are not worthy? Okay, good. Okay, good. There's nothing good about it, but you make it okay for her to say that. You want to stay in magician realm, and we don't necessarily, if the emotion comes up as it did, you deal with that, you honor it, but for now, it's a magician process, so detached. Okay, good, whatever. It's almost like, I don't care what you say, we're just going to go to the next question. This is not a big deal. Dissociated, right? Magician style. Once she's come up with proof, or multiple proofs how the initial belief is true, you ask them what it means to them. What does it mean to you that people that you're invisible and not noticed and all the stuff that she says? Because now we're starting to dig deeper. This is magician territory, a deeper understanding of the surface stuff that's happening. What it means, I'm completely pathetic or completely useless, or I can't, whatever it means to them. Again, the content of it does, to some extent, it doesn't matter to me what they say. It just matters that I remain curious and keep asking, oh, really? How does that work? Tell me more about that. The danger with scripts is that we move on to the next question, even though the previous answer, we don't understand what they actually meant. So you got to understand what they say. I want to be sure that I follow you. Please say that another way, right? You got to understand what they say, and then you move on to the next step. After they've said what it means to them, that you repeat that verbatim as best you can. You then go to, is that true in all parts of your life that you are worthless? Or is it true in all parts of your life that you are invisible? So either the limiting belief you started at the top, or the answer to the immediate previous question, whichever one makes more sense in the moment. Even, it doesn't really matter whether she says yes or no. If she says yes, it's true in all parts of my life, I go, tell me about those parts of your life where it's not true. So it's completely disregarding her yes, because I know it's not true. And we're not saying, oh, that's bollocks. It's, of course it must be. Like, no, just go, okay, good. Tell me a place where it's not true. So she told us about her clients. Now, again, in terms of next steps, it is unlikely that somebody with a lot of shame, and I'm not referring to Megan specifically, but the client with a lot of shame, we're going to have to dig shame work before we start blessing. And it might be a simultaneous process. But trying to put icing on a mud cake still leaves a mud cake. So we might need to do excavation for weeks and weeks and weeks before they're able to bless themselves. If we force them to bless themselves before they're able, it'll just prove to them they can't even do their homework. So it'll just reinforce the thing that they're not worthy or good enough or whatever it is. So tell me about those parts of your life where it's not true. Well, with my clients, and I do actually, yeah, so she said with the clients, that brings acceptance to it. And then the next question is, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you that you actually do bring value to your clients? And then, Megan, what came up with that question? Oh, you do have something to offer, and you do bring value into the world. Somewhere in here, the sadness came, the grief came, so we honored that, we spoke about it. And then I really wanted to complete this magician process. That's why I honored the grief briefly and moved on anyway. Now, if this was a real life session, you could have decided to follow the grief immediately when it showed up. that I wanted to demonstrate the process, so try to keep it as magician as I can. Whatever she says, okay, good. Now, you know, you have hundreds of ways based on the information she gave you that you can take it next. Any questions on the process?
Benny, one thing I found very interesting that you did, she said, I can be there for my clients or accept my clients. And you said, can you or do you? Which I liked, because actually she has to admit that she does it already. And that was good.
Exactly. And when you tune into the energetic difference between I can and I do, it's massive. And even in that, that's when the smile came, if I remember correctly. And it's like, oh, interesting. Okay, simple little process. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. There'll be groups of 2 and one group of 3. What I suggest we do is we do the process one way, and then we come back, and then if there's time, we'll do it another way. I really want you to take your time with this process. So when you go into the group, know that not everybody might get a chance to do this. We want to finish up on time in 29 minutes. Decide who's practitioner, decide who's client, go through the process. If you need help, raise your hand, and I'll pop into the different rooms just briefly from time to time. And then I'll kind of get a sense of when you're all finished and bring you all back at the same time. Also know that if your process is taking longer for whatever reason, then you get to finish it. So if you are volunteering as a client, please appreciate that if you volunteer for a client, you agree to the idea that your process might not complete. It might be halfway. You might only get to question 2. Well, that's called life, and that's just the way it is. So just be mindful of that. Tap as you wish, if you wish, or not. It's completely up to you. I'll put you in different rooms this time. Recreate rooms. Alrighty, invitation on your screen. I'll see you in there in a few minutes. That's all right. Sometimes that happens in a real life session. Time's up.
Yeah.
So, quick one before we go back into the groups and practice some more. Anything that you want to teach the rest of us? You found that worked or didn't work? Because there's often good learning in that.
Benny, there was one thing that came up when I was watching there was something, you know, the limiting belief, and then is that true? And how do you know it to be true? There needs to be a lot of flexibility there because I don't know, somehow it became quite complicated. I could see for Cara suddenly going, yeah, and really.
What shall I do now? Yeah, I did have a what shall I do now moment. But
No, not about, you know, what shall you do, that, yeah, just holding that flexibility. I can't remember it, but it was something, I don't know if you remember it, Jane, of there was a question in there that I was going, oh, that would have been really good to add to that, but actually it's gone now that I try and
if it comes back,
sorry.
if it comes back, do let us know.
Benny, I got stuck because everything was yes, it is true in all parts of my life. And so tell me about those parts where it's not true. No, it is true. And it was like, oh, we didn't get very far.
So what I would do, and I don't know the content, I would say, really? There's not a single place in your life where you are valuable or when you are capable? Like, really? Just because it'll be genuine, just what? I mean, that's utter nonsense, but I wouldn't say that. I would just imply that with my tone of voice, and hopefully they will kind of get it. And then the other way is, what Shirley, would you be okay in sharing what the thing was that was true everywhere for you?
I don't get what I want.
Okay. Did you come on this call today?
Yes.
Is that something you wanted?
Yes.
I rest my case.
I also got something to drink.
There you go. You probably had food to eat, and you had a bed to sleep in, and so on. So sometimes we actually have to lovingly just point out, because Shirley did not say what she said to be difficult or because she's in resistance. No. She just said what she said because that's her experience. So we have to facilitate and help them to see. You know, and I did say this example somewhere. If somebody says they're completely useless everywhere, listen, can you tie your shoelaces? Yes, I can. Okay, well, that's one place where you're not useless. Can you speak? Well, yeah, I can. Okay, so that's another place you're not useless. You know, you got to point out the obvious things, the small things sometimes for people before they can get the bigger things. One step at a time, meeting your client where they're at. A couple of tweaks from me. For this process, now you can do what you like when the call's over. For this process on the call today, please make sure that you get a belief about themselves. We're not talking about a belief about life or about money or about God or about sex or about things will never work out or stuff like that. If they say something like that, go, so what's the belief about yourself that might be underlying that? Or a question along those lines. We really want to focus this exercise on. And okay, so here's a way you might make it easier for them. Say, perhaps starting with the words I am. Okay, because that's going to lead them into I am not this or I am that, whatever. And then also, and this is it was already done, so I just want to remind the rest of the group, when somebody says, for example, oh well, that means that I'm not alone. You go, good, and when you're not alone, what are you? Oh, well, I suppose I'm connected or supported or befriended or whatever it is. There's a huge energetic difference between saying what you're not and then having to force the mind. It's a magician piece, remember? And to force the mind to go, shit, I suppose I am that. It's more insight, it's more understanding, it's more whatever. And then for some of you, get some warrior energy up. No, you go. No, you go. No, I'll go unless you want to go. But if you want to go, she doesn't want to go, then I'll go. But only if it's okay if you go. Yeah. I know. So you're going to go into the same groups. So no, in fact, I will put you in the same groups. Otherwise, it might get interesting. So you have about 10 minutes for this one, then we'll come back and close. What happened?
We ran out of time.
Yeah. And what also happened?
Well, I really found the questioning that Ellie did. It was very insightful. So it brought me to, it's sort of like, really brought me to a place where I had to see what lay underneath it, which was really, enlightening.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well done, Annie. Anybody else?
I know, and I now know where it was that I saw Caro get stuck, because I got stuck in exactly the same place. And it was not anything that needed to be added or subtracted, was that, and I think I even said it to you, it's like when you said to me, what about the limiting belief, and is that true? And I'm not sure whether I said it, but I noticed Caro said, no, it's not true. And then it was like, do you then switch the belief? Because almost you're working on a belief and then they're saying it's not actually true, although it wasn't, is it not true in all your life? So I was like, oh, okay, I could feel myself. I asked Jane for help at that point in time. I was like, okay, I don't know, I got lost kind of thing. And I know that I need to be more flexible, but yes.
I would just stick with the script.
Yeah.
I would just stick with the script. So you say, is it true? She says no. How do you know it's true? Give me some examples. It's almost like you ignore the no. And the reason that I would ignore that is because she gave me this belief up front. And then also what you said, Megan, intellectually we know it's not true. But that's not what we're dealing with. It still feels true, or it still acts out in the So as if she had said yes, you just continue completely disregarding her about the matter.
That helps. Thank you.
Wounding her deeply in the being ignored quarter. Yes, that's all. Anybody else?
I think for me, I uncovered a core belief that I really wasn't aware of.
Wow.
All the work you do on yourself, all the work, and there's still more.
That's an interesting belief in itself. Well, yes. So a couple of things from my point of view, a couple of distinctions. The first one is when you ask the client, give me some proof of where this belief is true, and they come up with historical proof. Well, that happened in my childhood, and this happened, and that happened. You go, okay, good. And where's the proof in your life right now? We want to make it current. like real, get them to see where the issue is prevalent right now. And then, and again, it's a fine one, and you need to play with this. It's almost like for some of you, it might perhaps be useful to go one level deeper in step one. So when somebody says the belief I have is I can't focus, that's something you can or cannot do. I'm curious, what is it about you that you can't focus? Probably, or possibly starting with the words I am. And that might be I am stupid or I am whatever. We really want to get to the I am statement. I might actually just change the script to say, give me a belief about you that's limiting, that starts with the word I am.
Okay.
So, you know, I can't have what I want. Even the one we demonstrated with Shirley in the last thing, you know, I can't have what I want. So what does it say about you, starting with the words I am? I am cursed. Okay, good. You know, Shirley's laughing. Maybe that feels true. I don't know. So really sticking, if you need to ask 3 or 4 or 5 different ways at different times, I think the answer to question 1 really sets the scene, sets the foundation for what follows. So give yourself license to take time with that to actually get an answer to the question you asked and not just words. Does that make sense? And play with it, you know, practice, practice, practice. All right, it's time for us to check out. So in a sentence or less, I really want to honor the end time. In a sentence or less, what are you leaving with, or what are you checking out with, or anything else you want to say? Caro, let's start with you again.
More interest in this subject than ever before. I just become more fascinated with it. So I'm intrigued and involved, and I like that.
Cool. We like it when that happens. Avanol.
I feel enriched and grateful.
So wait, Leslie.
I just feel like I can't wait to see my next client.
Bring it on.
These cool little buggers every time I come to one of these.
Sweet. Shirley?
More tools in my toolbox and ways to use them.
Sweetness.
Thank
Monique.
you.
I need more practice.
Okay, you got at least 9 other people on the call that might be willing to swap with you. Ellie. Oh, there's one. Ellie's just put up her hand to swap. There we go. And Megan. Ellie, what are you leaving with? Or checking out with?
Me?
Yes.
Much greater understanding to be able to do more work with myself and with my clients. And just such a richness. Lovely. Thank you.
Sweet. Megan.
It's definitely added a whole nother layer, which has been lovely, and leaving with that feeling of how important it is to practice and get it wrong to learn.
Exactly. I know you've heard me say, some of you have heard me say this more than once, but the guy who stopped the cabbie in New York and said, "Hey, cabbie, how do I get to Carnegie Hall?" And the cabbie said, "Practice, practice, practice." That's how you get to Carnegie Hall. So that's how it is. Jane.
This was great, and just great to move out of a person or ourself out of generalization. You know, we generalize about so much, and this is very focused, like that warrior arrow, kind of exploding the generalization.
Thank you. So that's a great way of saying what I said before in terms of question 1. Be sure that you move from generalized information to specific information. That'll set the scene for a more powerful process, I believe. Thank you, Jane. Carol.
For me, this has been wonderful, and I think I really value these calls. It's shown me today how much more we can do with this stuff. So thank you.
Exactly. So a couple of things on that point. I do believe that if you were to listen to all the recordings again, you will get another layer. Absolutely. Or read the transcripts I find hard for myself because it's typed language and I don't know. But anyway, whatever your preferred mechanism is. And then also, you know that I love these calls too. And so don't always wait for daddy to offer them. Feel free to ask. I might say yes or no. You know, at some level, you also need to take responsibility for your own learning and ask for what you want, knowing that the answer might be no. No. Thanks for asking, and no. Or
Thanks, Dad.
probably,
Thanks, Daddy.
yeah, you're welcome. Or likely, yeah, cool, set it up. Get 10 people, we'll have fun. Because as you say, I mean, I've been doing this, I don't even know when I did my shadow work training, probably 15 years ago, and there's still more. I discovered stuff in this call today in responding to your questions that I didn't even know. So absolutely. All right. Lots of love to you all. Bless you. The recording will be available. The private rooms have not been recorded. So the stuff you did in private is private. All the other stuff will be made available. And Megan says, teach Matrix again. Yeah, I don't think in my lifetime. But hopefully there will be a Matrix training in South Africa soon. Okay, dokes. Lots of love to you all. Have fun. Ciao,
Thank
ciao.
you, Benny.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.